And my students often come in and they want to inform the public. And I say, that's great, but we have to do more than inform. So we have a triad that I call data, emotion, action. So we start with the data always, and then we find the story that will effectively tell what's going on. And then we figure out how to get it out to the world. And we try to be really focused. So who's your target audience? Is it going to be policymakers? Is it going to be people who are at risk? Is it going to be healthcare providers? Because the stories you tell may be quite different depending on your target audience.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome CEO of Narrative.
I'm Julienne Ryan, and I'm happy to be here as always. So I'm excited about today's meeting. And
yeah, same here. Great to see you again, Julienne. Thanks for being here. And now, before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast Leadership Story Talks wherever you can find podcasts. Leave a review, and also check out our YouTube channel in this episode's notes. You can also go to narrative.com, narrativ.com/podcast, where you will find all of our previous episodes, at this point more than 140. And without further ado, I now want to introduce our guest, Dr. Neal Baer, who is an award-winning showrunner, television writer and producer, physician, and author. He's a lecturer on global health and social medicine, and the co-director of the master's degree program in media, medicine, and health at Harvard Medical School, which we'll hear a little bit more about later on. He was also an executive producer and showrunner for Designated Survivor, Under the Dome, and Law & Order Special Victims Unit, and he was a writer and producer on ER. He's also the author of The Promise and Peril of CRISPR, Johns Hopkins University Press. So you will get all of these references and links into the episode's notes. So make sure to check that out if you want to learn more about Neal Baer and his background. So Neal Baer, without further ado, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So to kick us off, I want to ask you a question that we ask of all of our guests across the board. And that is, what is an experience that has shaped who you are today, something that continues to influence you or inform you in some way?
My fifth grade French teacher, Penny Taylor, in Denver, Colorado. Nope.
wow.
So how? Why? Well, she saw me. She saw who I was, and she saw my potential. And we're still friends today. And she brought French culture and French language and taught me how to sing Yellow Submarine in French and Downtown in French by Petula Clark. And I wrote my first play in French for her. And it was my first play. And I played all the parts. So I didn't know that I would become a novelist and a television writer and an academic writer, but she saw something in me that I think, kept me going and kept us friends all these years.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. And of course, I'm doubly, I'm extremely impressed by that, of course, that you would be able to write your first play in French. I don't know if it was your first, but to at least write a play in French. It was your first. Wow. And that was in fifth grade, right?
Fifth grade, 10 years old.
Wow.
I played all the parts. It had different sections in it. There was a mad scientist. I mean, it's like, and it was really fun for me to do it. And then I did some other plays that were written that I performed in French, and she took me to, and a small group of us, up to the junior high, now called middle school. And it was so exciting to perform this play about a guinea pig that gets loose in a restaurant. But we just had a repartee and a friendship that has lasted all these years. And I saw her recently in Paris because I live in Paris part-time, and she was visiting. And so we stay in touch. She just emailed me the other day because her grandchild is trans, and I just did a podcast, not a podcast, but I just did a Zoom panel on barriers to trans health and it was at Harvard Medical School. So we were chatting about that. So we're still talking. How many years later? I would say it is 60 years later.
Wow, amazing! What
Touches
already?
my heart.
Yeah, what an inspiring story already. And the podcast has only started. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. And well, and actually, it's a good transition to the next question that I had because of your, we now know where the writing started or where that inspiration was sparked. But you have had this, as I said in the bio, this quite accomplished career as an executive producer and writer for shows like ER and Law and Order, et cetera. And I know that one of the things that we were struck by is that some of these shows kind of introduced portrayals of LGBTQ plus characters that were certainly outside of the norm for the time. And I'm wondering about your own personal experiences and how those shaped your approach to some of these storylines and maybe what challenges you might have faced in kind of pushing boundaries in mainstream media.
Well, certainly I didn't come out until 2013, May 13th, 2013. So soon is the anniversary. It'll be the 12th anniversary, but I knew I was gay probably since I was 4 or 5. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew the attraction element of it and the interest and the emotional connection to male figures. And so I think the shows that I did it wasn't until 2013, so that would be when I was doing um, Under the Dome and then Designated Survivor that I was out. So I wasn't out during ER, SVU, or A Gifted Man. So those were the 3 shows I wasn't out. So I look back and see that a lot of episodes that I did and a lot of the storylines that we did are influenced by my being in the closet. And so, and my interest in HIV from a medical perspective, because I was in medical school at Harvard from 1991 to 1996. So I was at the height of AIDS where we really couldn't do anything to suddenly we could do a lot. And so in 1994, when ER started, we still couldn't do very much. And then in 95, we could do a lot, as I said. And so that, I think, gave shape to the storyline we did with Gloria Rubin in the Jeannie Boulet story of a young woman who was HIV positive. And we wanted to depict her as someone who lived a fulfilling and healthy life, having HIV and being able to take antiretrovirals. And so that storyline started in 95. And I think we were the first to depict someone over a long period of time. And then I went to John Wells, who the showrunner and the executive producer over many, many years there for the whole time, actually. And he was my childhood friend in Denver, Colorado. So he hired me on China Beach, the first show I worked on, and then he hired me on ER when I was a 4th-year medical student at Harvard. I came for 2 months and stayed 7 years. And so I asked him if he would bring Gloria's character back, I think in year 14 of ER, to show that she was doing really well, that she had a fulfilling life and was healthy. And he did. And she did go back on as her character. So I thought that was really incredibly powerful way to tell that story. And then, I made Laura Innes's character a lesbian in the last episode that I wrote before I went on to SVU. So that was one of the first leading characters who was out. I still wasn't out. And I did many, many episodes dealing with HIV deniers and people on the down low and those things because I, was dealing with it myself. These stories on TV just don't happen, at least the ones I've been involved with, out of thin air. But so many of the really trenchant, emotionally riveting stories come out of the struggles that the writers have in their own lives.
Mhm.
That was, I saw people dying of AIDS, and then I saw people suddenly miraculously living. And so that became, a big element of Gloria's story.
Yeah. Yeah.
To anyone who didn't, who are younger and didn't come firsthand that it's history, it'd be really important for them to even watch some of these episodes because we learn from stories. I remember where Friends came out, it wasn't in a classroom, wasn't in a display, it was, sitting in a stairwell where somebody's pouring their heart out about what their situation is. I remember being on sidewalks running into somebody and they were giving the roll call of who's still alive and who's dead from
Yes.
HIV. And then
Yeah.
later on, when the medications came into being, knowing friends who are now thriving and have managed a lifetime. But to get the context and to get the
Right.
little snippets of fact behind it really brings to forward of what it took to bring all that life in possibilities. So I do appreciate you sharing and your honesty about, that it wasn't just you evolved over time and what you were
Oh,
comfortable. And it was
absolutely.
huge. It was a huge step to
True.
come out. I
Yeah.
mean, back
If
then.
you watch it in 1994, there's a series of episodes starring Lucy Liu um,
Mm.
as, as a young mother with HIV who is given HIV to her baby, Che, who dies in the episode. I think we did 3 episodes, and her guilt and her fear and what people were going through. And then 95, things changed, fortunately. And so that was inspired by, things I saw as a medical student at Harvard, and now and you can certainly watch, and people do watch ER now. It's nice. I say the scrubs, don't really change. It's, clipboards and computers look different, uh, uh, but the scrubs look the same. So it's a, and so in a way it hasn't aged like maybe other stories or other shows. But you cut to the present, and so where are we with HIV, let's say, and what's the story? And the story is that there's now a treatment to prevent HIV that is 2 injections a year. So now the question is going to be, how can it be made um, available, and how can it be made affordable, particularly in these political times? Because we know it works. The studies that have been done, for instance, on women in sub-Saharan Africa showed that nobody contracted HIV. And, it's one thing to take a drug every day it's PrEP, to prevent it. And it's another to have a shot twice a year.
Mm.
So we have these miraculous advances, but we need to figure out how to get them out to the public. And that really does involve storytelling and people telling their stories. I was very moved by Linda Villarosa, who is she teaches for us. She's a renowned writer. She got the Pulitzer for a book a couple years ago. She was the finalist. They give 2 Pulitzers, the Pulitzer and the Pulitzer finalist, for a book called Under the Skin. And she wrote a really important piece maybe about 10 years ago, cover story of the New York Times Sunday Magazine about HIV in the US South, which is probably a higher rate than anywhere else in the world now. And amongst Black men who have sex with men or queer people or trans people. And it's estimated that 1 out of 2 will become HIV positive. So how can this be? So this story of how can this be, she starts with the data, and that's what we do in our program at Harvard. We start with this data, this terrifying data, and then we tell stories drawing on the arts and humanities, broadly defined: poetry, documentaries, essays, op-eds, dance, music, you name it. We've done it at this point, to tell that story effectively, given the data. And she did it through this cover story in the New York Times, which was profound. Like, why is it that when we have a way to prevent HIV, we clearly have a way to prevent it now through PrEP and through treatment. We call it U equals U. So again, on my show, Designated Survivor, we were the first show to do U equals U. Untransmissible equals um, uh, um, uninfected. So you're not, if someone is taking antivirals, they won't be able to transmit HIV. And if they take PrEP, they won't be able to get HIV. And so, um, how is it that then still 1 out of 2 Black men in the South who have sex with men will become HIV positive? And that's a question that goes to what we call the social determinants or the social forces of health: stigma, access, cost, the church, um, shame. So how do we tell those stories to motivate people to become involved? And my students often come in and they want to inform the public. And I say, that's great, but we have to do more than inform. So we have a triad that I call data, emotion, action. So we start with the data always, and then we find the story that will effectively tell what's going on. And then we figure out how to get it out to the world. And we try to be really focused. So who's your target audience? Is it going to be policymakers? Is it going to be people who are at risk? Is it going to be healthcare providers? Because the stories you tell may be quite different depending on your target audience. And so that's a big focus of our master's degree program, is really thinking hard about what's effective. And we look at the data. Um, I want to tell you a story about one of my students right now. She's doing her capstone project on women who contract cervical cancer. Now, again, here's a disease that no one should get. Why is that? Because we know that Gardasil, the vaccine, and Pap smears, the test, can prevent someone from dying from cervical cancer, and yet, 300,000 women, over 300,000 around the world die, and the highest rate is amongst Vietnamese immigrants in the United States. So she looked to see who has the highest rate. That was the data. And then she looked at, where can I find these women? And we were doing research using AI platforms. We use one called SciSpace that we really like. And you can ask questions. And it turns out that a great way to find Vietnamese female immigrants is through nail salons.
Huh.
So then she designed a program where it's looking at giving manicurists short documentaries that they can then share with their clients to inform them about getting Pap smears or Gardasil, and the stories of these women that have changed their lives because they may have had a mother who died of cervical cancer because she was ashamed or fearful, or there was a language barrier. So we looked at what's effective, and nobody had been really writing academic pieces on nail salons and preventing cervical cancer, but people have written a lot about Black women's hair salons and preventing hypertension and other diseases. So then we look at what's effective there. Is it pamphlets? Is it posters? Is it a training to tell stories? How do we do this? So that's really like the essentials of our master's degree program, which is looking at a data point that inflames them, that they want to address, picking a modality that they want to use. Is it documentary? Is it poetry? Whatever. And then thinking about how to get it to the target audience and how to get it out to the public.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you. There's so much in those statements you've made. There's people that you will get names of after us who will be excited to know about you within our general community. And then secondly, your example is a living proof of meet them where they are
Right.
and where do they live
Exactly.
and work. So it was a very
AI helped us. I mean, I actually knew, because I'd been looking at this but I took my student through this exercise of, well, where do you think we can get the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak? Where can we find women who are Vietnamese immigrants? Like, and the answer is there's a high number who work in nail salons. So let's start there. We can't hit everybody, but we can tell stories that can be really profoundly effective. And that's, what she did. And so um, it's been really,
Yeah.
I'm going to see her project presentation in a couple weeks. So it's
Ah,
exciting to
goodness.
see. Yeah. And she's working in Chinatown in Boston doing
Ah.
her project and getting it out there.
That's amazing. And so, tell us maybe. I'm curious about the kinds of people, the students that you have. I mean, given your background, both in the medical field and the media field, um, you know, who do you get? I mean, are these doctors? Are these medical students? Are these like where do they come from?
So we have 30 graduate students this year. So it's a 1-year program, and we're in our third year. So about a third are right out of college, super bright, going to medical school. So one of our students is going to the University of Chicago, and she in the fall to medical school, and her capstone is on dance and postpartum depression in Black women. And so presenting that through dance and then using it for an audience to talk about. So so a third are right out of school. Several are in medical school taking time off to do a master's degree from around the country. A couple are residents taking a year off to do this because they want to be able to communicate um, in a stronger way, not only with their patients, but to be advocates. And then several are fellows. And we have one who's a fellow who's a hematologist oncologist in Boston, and she's doing that work. She's incredible, and they bring their own stories and compassion to the program. And then the others are health advocates, kinesiologists, social workers, um, um, people who uh, want to work for foundations, people who want to work in policy. So anything that's health related with storytelling and a way to make an impact is who comes to our master's program. And then we have an online program as well. We have people from around the world. It's going on right now, actually. It starts in February and it goes till June. And that's more of a boot camp for people who have a passion project and they want to find a way to tell it. And we have about 20 to 25 different presentations over a week where we have a dancer, a poet, and these are renowned people. The poet is Laura Colby, who publishes in the New Yorker, and she's an internist at Cornell. So we have the top folks. I mean, we have a dancer, Pontus Lidberg, who was the principal dancer of the Swedish Royal Ballet and directed the Danish Royal Ballet and is a renowned choreographer. So he teaches the dance side. We have Ricardo Perez Gonzalez, who has a play at the Huntington in Boston right now, called Don't Eat the Mangoes. And he talks about a playwriting for social change. So we have this, plethora of talent who speak, and we also give each participant a mentor so that when they're designing their project, depending on what they want to do, it could be op-eds. Our students have published everywhere, from the peer-reviewed journals of the New England Journal. We have a student who just published in Lancet like a couple of weeks ago. We have a student who published in Stat, which is really the best place to go for medical news, which is part of the Boston Globe. So it is really a boot camp to get them to really focus on their storytelling project. So that's more or less healthcare providers. A lot of physicians do that because they can't spend a year with us, and they spend a week with us online. We started it before the pandemic in person, and then we had to move it to online, and it works really well because we have people from every continent except Antarctica. And so,
You'll
and
get those penguins soon.
exactly, I'd love to. I'd love to. I love penguins. The penguins are very interesting. I have a friend, just as a plug. It's an amazing book called Wildhood, about what we can learn from the animal kingdom about our own behavior.
Mm.
And also, and Wildhood talks a lot about penguins, and we can learn a lot from penguins. We can learn a lot from hyenas and all kinds of animals, about our own behavior, and and our own truculence and our own brutality and bullying and things, because it all goes on in the animal kingdom. We're not so special.
Mm.
It's for people who want to make a difference in promoting health and well-being. And I say, for me, what's most important is that they have a passion and curiosity. And I used to say, I gave a commencement address at Harvard Medical School in 2018, I believe, and I said, curiosity is the gateway to empathy. But I've changed that now, and I say now, curiosity is the gateway to compassion. Because I think empathy is an overused word these days. We hear it all the time, like empathy this, empathy that. And what does it really mean? Can we really walk in someone else's shoes? And the answer is no. We can only imagine what their lives are like. And how do we imagine what their lives are like? And this is what the two of you do so brilliantly, is through storytelling. And so I like the word compassion, that I can accompany you on your journey. And I'm not like being you. I'm not walking in your shoes. I don't presume to be able to do that, but I can accompany you, and I can imagine what it's like. But I only know really what it's like to be, for me, a gay, white, Jewish raised, cisgendered male, trained as a pediatrician. But I can imagine what it's like to be a Native American lesbian if I hear your story. And and that's what we're here about today, of course. And that's what you all do, is that. And I think that that's really helpful for me. I learned this from a professor at Harvard, actually, named Doris Summer, where she corrected me when I was talking about empathy. She said, "What does that really mean?" And I said, "Well, what word do you use?" And she said, "Compassion." And I was like, and accompaniment. And in terms of what you all do, I want to share something that I've done with writers in Hollywood, which is we took them on story tours. So we had a bus and we took them to places in LA they'd never been. They'd been to, of course, the West Side and Beverly Hills and Encino and Hollywood, and but they hadn't been to the city of Vernon, and that's in LA. And that's where there are rendering plants and high cancer rates. And so we took them to places where there were stories that they hadn't heard or seen. And we had a community member hop on the bus and tell the story then to the writers. And then we did it in South Africa, and we did it in India as well. I did it with someone named Sandra De Castro Buffington, who did that with me. And she does these story tours. And I was talking to Doris Summer, the professor at Harvard, the other day about doing this with leaders. Like, she does this with leaders now. She takes leaders on tours to see, take them out of the boardroom or out of the C-suite or whatever, and into the world to see what the impact is of policy and what we're doing, and to see the stories.
Yeah.
So
Raise my hand like I'm in
Yeah.
class. So ironically, when you were talking before, a phrase I coined years ago came to mind. It was story tourism, because when we visit another land, we see that land in objective terms, why they use, how they grow their crops, what kind of stone do they use they're building, but we bring a lesson about ourselves of how we're operating. So I think that's beautiful. But your session here has such an abundance of learnings. And one of it is the arts and science have this beautiful relationship. And arts is not just to be entertained, it's an educator, it's a communication tool of richness. And you've shown where it has outcomes that are so important.
Mm.
And this is going to be uplifting. I think I'm in love with all our guests. I think they're fantastic, but this one has a special place in my heart because
Oh,
you're showing possibilities of
yes,
that marriage of education and science and community and so much more. I can't
right.
say enough good things.
I talk a lot to AAAS now, just yesterday, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Why? How do we help scientists tell their stories outside of peer-reviewed journal articles? Because there's such a gap between the population really understanding science and what they do. So how do we bridge that gap? And I like what you said about storytelling. I don't think about it as education or entertainment. I think about it as being something that's inherent in human beings, that we want to know about each other and the stories, and hopefully they'll enlighten. But it's not for me to like teach you, and it's not for me to really, I think, entertain you, meaning park your brain somewhere and like sit on the couch. I hope that my shows have been that they've been a story where you can bring the template of your own life to my stories. I think of one I did on SVU some years ago called Mercy, and it was an episode about a mother who euthanizes her baby with Tay-Sachs. So I chose, as a writer, um, a genetic syndrome that's always fatal, always horrible, and the child will die quite young. And then got into, through my characters, Mariska, Chris Maloney, Richard Belzer, and Ice-T, different positions that they took given what she had done. So Maloney's character is the father of five and said, hey, if my child was suffering like this, I would do the same thing. Whereas Belzer's character was an Orthodox Jew, played in that show, Munch. He said, no, it's up to God. And so here's this conversation that I hope the audience viewer, the member of the audience, can bring their own experience to. Sometimes that's dangerous because they'll bring their experience, which might be very different from what they're watching, and they'll say, no, 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 it's different. But that's also what stories do. They bring us together, but they also differentiate.
Yeah.
But that's why I liked doing SVU, because there were different opinions, and we learned about our characters through their own personal journeys. And so it wasn't about educating. I mean, yes, you learn that Tay-Sachs is a bad genetic disease, and it's most common amongst Ashkenazi Jews, and it's incurable. And yes, so there were facts, and we make sure that the facts are that what we say are accurate. They are facts. And I work with Hollywood Health and Society, which is out of USC. They provide accurate information to any TV writer on a health issue. That was funded by the late Norman Lear. And so we make sure it's accurate, but then we go from there. And it's not to, entertain is kind of a funny word. It's like, I'm not sure what it's like. Does that mean like you don't think? So for me, it's like if I tell a great story that has that, what I call the oh my God moment, like, then I think I've done my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Wonderful. Oh my
absolutely.
goodness.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful interview, and I, one thought that comes to my mind is it's always a risk to choose to tell a story, whether it's your story or whether you're writing it for a show, but I don't know. This proves again that it's a risk that's well worth taking. We often in our work come across people who sort of hesitate, and to give something of themselves, or to tell something about themselves that perhaps that's a little bit more personal because, as we talked about earlier, maybe it was in the boardroom or something, and maybe, that's not a story I want to tell to this group of people. And obviously there are ways that we work through that. But ultimately, what we're afraid of is taking that risk. And so many times we've seen it pay off. And I love the way that you're blending all of these sides of yourself, and that it's ending up as a teacher in this wonderful program at Harvard. And I can kind of see the journey. We've only known each other for about 30 minutes, but I can see that journey from fifth grade, to then being, a medical student and in media and, running show, the writer, et cetera, et cetera. And we've talked about it all, and now teaching and kind of passing it on, and now your students doing this wonderful work as well. So I don't have a question here, but it's more about really encouraging our listeners to look up your work and look up this program at Harvard and go back. We'll make sure to put all these links. Go back to those ER episodes. I mean, I think that's the wonderful thing about streaming, is that we can actually find things fairly easily now, right? We don't have to go and dig it up in some library. So yeah, just wanted to thank you for sharing all these experiences. I think our audience is really taking a lot away from it. Is there anything, Julienne, I'm seeing that maybe you want to say something else.
I know, I'm just like short of like having a flag here waving you down. We always talk offline. We just did this after and say, how can we tell people how to use stories? Because that's just a word, like in their work, in their life. This is textbook example of like the richness of the tool, and from your classroom to the applied to the communities you reach. So this is our case study example that's going to be put to good use. So there you go. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Neal, is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with? Or I know we've covered a lot, but in case there's something that's missing.
Well, I think what's interesting to me is I did an interview with the late Studs Terkel. I may have been the last person to interview him. He was very frail at that point, almost like a little bird. And he told me that, and we were talking about storytelling, and he said that what impressed him so, and he was a great storyteller. He did the book Working. He had a radio show about people's stories. He was one of the first really great storytellers of getting the story out there. And he said that what so impressed him was during the civil rights movement, when he would record people telling their stories. And it meant that, someone was interested in hearing about them. But even more profound than his recording them was when he played them back for that person and for a group of people. And he said it made people feel like they mattered, that their story had a place. And I never will forget that it's so incredibly human to listen to someone's story and then play it out for others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for those beautiful words. And on that note, I want to thank you for being here, and thank you, Julienne, for being my wonderful co-host.
My pleasure. It's been a joy.
Yeah, and I want to remind our listeners to go back to the episode and definitely check out the episode notes in this one, because there's going to be a lot of references and links that you can check out for yourselves and learn more about. Also, to remind you that if you've been inspired by this session, at Narrative, this is what we do. We teach people how to tell stories for whatever purpose you might have, but it's really about connecting who you are with what you do and why it matters. And I want to let you all know that we have a special gift for our listeners right now, because we've partnered with the New Mexico State University's Global Campus to create an on-demand, self-paced storytelling training where you can learn all these principles. And it's really helpful for interviews, leadership presence, and even pitching projects. And you can use code NARRATIVE, NARATIV, for a special 25% discount just for you listeners. So go and find that in the episode notes as well as on our website. And if you have any questions, we're always ready to listen to you. Don't hesitate at all. So until next time, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.